Imagine committing the perfect crime, only to be haunted by the very person you thought you killed. Richard Mason, a man trapped in a loveless marriage. When he sees an opportunity to get rid of his wife and pursue a new love, he carefully plans the ultimate crime, one with an airtight alibi. But just when he thinks he's in the clear, the impossible happens. His wife's possessions mysteriously reappear, and witnesses claim to have seen her alive. Is she really dead? Or is someone playing a cruel game to drive him to madness? This is a film where paranoia, deception, and justice collide in the shadows. Hello to all the classic people that are returning. I'm glad you're back. I want to welcome any new visitors and let you know that there will be spoilers ahead. Today on Classic Movie Review, we are taking on film noir Conflict 1945. The movie stars Humphrey Bogart and Sidney Greenstreet. By virtue of that, it should be a great movie. But not so much this time. Bogart was dark and moody, but not someone you'd pull for. Greenstreet did his famous laugh, but it seemed forced. This film is rated 7.1 on imdb.com. On RottenTomatoes.com, the film doesn't have a tomato meter score and has a 76% audience approval. That's a little higher than I expected. Cranky old New York Times film critic Bosley Carruthers said in the June 16, 1945 review, quote, "A favorite demonstration in dramas of a psychological turn is that a man can't live with his conscience after he has committed a mortal crime." And this is the thesis, expounded with considerable melodramatic grit in Warner Brothers' Conflict. In this cold and calculated shocker, Humphrey Bogart plays a man who kills his wife because his affections have turned to her younger sister. The murder is done under circumstances that seem to leave him totally unsuspected, but a hole is found in his story by a fat psychologist friend. Curtis Bernhardt has directed the story, which is neither original nor profound, for a grimly subdued tone and a tempo that has a persuasive push. The action is slow and generally muted. Rose Hobart is properly annoying as the wife who gets bumped off, and Alexis Smith is a blonde and placid iceberg as the sister whom Mr. Bogart loves. The appeal of this film, which is unpleasant and obviously morbid in theme, will be to those customers who are fascinated by the anxieties of a tortured man, who like to listen figuratively to the desperate thumping of the telltale heart, unquote. Actors. The great actor Humphrey Bogart played the homicidal husband, Richard Mason. Since most of the screen time was focused on Bogart, this film should have been a lot better. This fantastic actor was first covered in the wartime propaganda film Sahara, 1943. There's a link below. Sidney Greenstreet played psychologist Dr. Mark Hamilton. This incredible actor was not in good enough form to save this film. Greenstreet was first covered in what I consider the best film noir, The Maltese Falcon, 1941, and there's a link below. Frank Wilcox served in a minor role as engineer Robert Freston. Wilcox was first covered in the so-so film noir, Night Editor, 1946, and there's a link below. Alexis Smith played the younger sister and object of Richard, Humphrey Bogart's affection, Evelyn Turner. Smith was born in Canada in 1921. Her family moved to California when she was around 1. Smith began studying ballet and was performing live by the age of 13. She attended Hollywood High School. Smith earned a degree in drama from Los Angeles City College. A Warner Brothers talent scout saw her in a school production, and Smith was signed to a contract with them in 1941. Tall, with blue-green eyes and a husky voice, Smith was a quickly rising talent. The studio marketed Smith as the Dynamite Girl and the Flame Girl. This somewhat limited the roles she was offered. Smith's movies include Dive Bomber 1941 and Gentleman Jim 1942, 2 of the 4 films she made with Errol Flynn. She was in The Constant Nymph 1943 with Charles Boyer. One of her best received films was Night and Day 1946. This film was followed by film noir Conflict, Of Human Bondage 1946, Stallion Road 1947, and film noir The Two Mrs. Carols 1947. As she rolled towards the decade of the 1950s, Smith was paired with Clark Gable in Any Number Can Play, 1949, A Woman in White, 1948, Here Comes the Groom, 1951, The Turning Point, 1952, and The Young Philadelphians, 1959. In the 60s, Smith stopped making films to work on stage with her husband. She was also active on television, including shows like The Love Boat, Dallas, and Cheers. Smith's last film was The Age of Innocence, 1993. She died in 1993, leaving a legacy of a beautiful actress who was not strong enough to make it to the top. Rose Hobart was perfectly cast as the unhappy wife of Richard, Humphrey Bogart, Kathryn Madison. The white streak in her dark hair set the perfect mood. Hobart was born in 1906 in New York City. She showed an early interest in the theater and started performing at the age of 15. Hobart's first film was Lilium, 1930. Some of her later films include Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, 1931, Tower of London, 1939, there's a link below, I'll Sell My Life, 1941, Salute to the Marines, 1943, Conflict, 1945, and Bride of Vengeance, 1949. Hobart was blacklisted by the Un-American House Un-American Activities Committee based on the testimony of Lee J. Cobb. Yes, he named names. Hobart moved to television in the 1960s and passed away in 2000. Story. The movie begins with the writing of Dr. Mark Hamilton, Sidney Greenstreet, inviting his friend, Richard Mason, Humphrey Bogart, and Kathryn Mason, Rose Hobart, to a party in honor of the couple's 5th anniversary. On the night of the party, the Masons are getting dressed. Kathryn has given Richard the business for coming home late. Kathryn is a snazzy dresser and wears jewels and flowers. The couple really can't stand each other. Finally, Kathryn says she knows Richard has a crush on her sister, Evelyn Turner, Alexis Smith, who is staying with them. Richard tries to retreat, but Kathryn goes for blood. Under cross, he admits that he loves the younger sister, but has no plans to do anything about it. Kathryn mocks him for falling in love with a younger person during this later stage of his life. Evelyn eventually comes to the room and they all leave for the party. Dr. Hamilton is a single psychology professor who enjoys creating and growing rose varieties. Dr. Hamilton gives Kathryn one of the species he has discovered. Young psychology professor Norman Halsworth, Charles Drake, Dr. Grant, Grant Mitchell, and his wife Nora Grant, Ann Shoemaker, are also at the party. Richard can't get past his crush on Evelyn. The talk turns to love and marriage. Evelyn is a true believer, and Richard perks up when she talks. On the drive home, Kathryn warns Richard to drive carefully because of the rain. Evelyn is sitting in the back seat of the car. Kathryn and Evelyn are talking about Norman. She also says that their mother wants the younger sister to return home. Richard is checking out Evelyn in the rearview mirror. Kathryn screams, "Look out," as Richard drives off the road. In a confused swirl, Richard hears Dr. Hamilton talking about obsession, Kathryn talking about never giving Richard a divorce, and Evelyn talking about true love.
Sometimes a thought can be like a malignant disease and start to eat away the willpower.
I suppose you'd like me to step out of the picture. Well, I'll never do that. Never.
Love has been man's inspiration for centuries.
Richard wakes in the hospital and only has a broken leg. Dr. Grant from the party is his medical doctor. Richard asks about Evelyn first and then about his wife. They're both okay. 5 weeks later, Richard is standing by the window looking at an x-ray of his leg. When he hears Kathryn and Dr. Grant coming, he hurries to his wheelchair. The doctor examines him and the leg has healed. Richard pretends he can't walk. Dr. Grant says he will be fine in time. They confirm that no one can prove that Richard cannot walk. Richard suggests that he and Kathryn go to the lake for a week or so. Dr. Grant asks about Evelyn and mentions that he thought she and Halsworth were becoming a couple. After the doctor is gone, Richard asks Kathryn if she told Evelyn about the crush. She says no, and Richard apologizes for the trouble he has caused. She cuts him to the quick, saying, "It's funny how virtuous a man can be when he's helpless." The butler, Phillips, Edwin Stanley, loads the car for the mountain trip. Phillips is in a hurry because he is going on vacation. Richard, who is still sitting in his wheelchair, calls his work and tells Freston, Frank Wilcox, that he will have to come into the house that night. Meanwhile, Kathryn is fussing about getting ready. She is wearing a snazzy outfit with a hat and plenty of jewelry. Phillips is gone, and Richard recommends that she go on the trip alone due to some work that came up, and he will join her in a day or two. Kathryn gets a nice cameo ring out of the safe to wear with her outfit. Richard reminds Kathryn to drive safely on the mountain roads. Like a good wife, Kathryn drives straight to Dr. Hamilton's home to ask him to check in on Richard while she is away. Dr. Hamilton agrees, and he gives Kathryn one of his prize roses to pin onto her dress. Dr. Hamilton says Kathryn and Evelyn are his favorite people. He also says that Kathryn and Richard almost make him believe that marriage can work. Kathryn heads off to the mountains. The roads get smaller and smaller until she is on a twisty one-lane dirt road that I would only take using a four-wheel drive vehicle. Kathryn comes to a fork in the road. It's 93 miles via Palomar and 81 miles via Martinez Canyon. She takes a shorter route. What is that, like 4 more hours of driving? Of course, as she drives, there was a light rain. Coming around one of the hairpin turns, Kathryn is blocked by a car on the road. She honks the horn. Suddenly, a dark figure appears in the woods. She begins to turn around when the figure calls her name. She sees that it is Richard and calms down for a second. Then she realizes that he is walking with a cane.
Why, you're walking, Richard. You're walking without help. How did you get here?
Run away. Roll up the window. Lock the door. Keep backing away. Richard walks to the car as Kathryn asks questions that she already knows the answer to. He murders her off screen, gathers her belongings, and pushes her in the car over the cliff. The car hits a stack of wood, and the logs crush the car, forming what looks like a teepee-style fire ring. Freston, from Robert's work, make it to the dark house. Robert has made it back from the murder site and is sitting in his wheelchair in the den. He's on the phone calling the lodge and asking about his wife, although he knows she will never arrive. Freston and Richards go over the work plan. Richard calls the lodge again and tells Freston his worries. The phone rings, but Dr. Hamilton is calling to check on Richard. Dr. Hamilton suggests that Richard call the police. As he does, Freston shows some plans for a tanker. Part of the design looks like the log fall in the car. Richard is a little shaken as the police answer his call. In the morning, Richard, Dr. Hamilton, and Phillips are in the den while Detective Lieutenant Egan, Patrick O'More, and another cop ask them questions. Why is Lieutenant Egan British? At first, the cops focus on the visit to Dr. Hamilton. Then they ask Richard what she was wearing. He describes a custom green dress, saying she had a wedding ring, an engagement ring, a cameo ring, and a heart-shaped locket with a picture. Richard continues that she had on a rose and looked very smart. The highway patrol officer arrives and says they have not located the car or any sign of a crash. Detective Lieutenant Egan brings up the idea that Kathryn would have run away. Dr. Hamilton pipes up that they should send for Evelyn, and Richard says he already has. Evelyn comes to stay at the house with Richard. Richard is out of the wheelchair and walking with just a cane. Evelyn asks Richard if there was anything wrong with Kathryn before she disappeared. He tells her that Kathryn was imagining that Richard was in love with Evelyn. Dr. Hamilton shows up outside the window to look at the roses. He comes inside. The phone rings and it's the police. Richard is called to the police headquarters to examine a clue. They have picked up a homeless man with the cameo ring. He said he picked it out of a lady's pocket on a crowded street corner. The homeless man describes Kathryn's green hat. Dr. Hamilton recommends that Richard take some time off and go to a fishing lodge with him. Richard invites Evelyn to come along. Dr. Hamilton leaves. Richard says goodnight to Evelyn, but he's pining pretty bad. Richard enters his bedroom and smells his wife's perfume. He is confused and buzzes for Phillips. When the butler arrives, he confirms that he is the only one that has entered the room. As Richard prepares for bed, he finds Kathryn's keys lying on a book. He hurries to the den and opens the safe. Inside, Richard finds Kathryn's wedding ring. He calls the police and tells Detective Lieutenant Egan about the findings. Later, Richard and Evelyn are fishing from a pier. Dr. Hamilton returns from fishing on a boat. They are all a lot more relaxed. They walk down a trail towards the hotel. Dr. Hamilton says he has invited Halsworth to the lodge as a companion for the younger Evelyn. Richard is not happy about this. They pass by the bonfire area, and the stacked logs remind Richard of the log fall where he killed Kathryn. Halsworth and Evelyn dance in the lodge as Richard and Dr. Hamilton watch from the table. Richard is sulking as Dr. Hamilton talks about what a good couple the young people would be. A porter tells Richard that he has a long-distance call. Richard goes to the booth and the operator transfers the call. However, no one is on the line. Richard is shaken and calls the cops to see if they are the ones who called. It wasn't them. When Richard asks the operator who the call is from, she says she believed the name was Mrs. Mason. Halsworth takes Evelyn outside for some fresh air. Back at the table, Richard brings up the homeless man again. Dr. Hamilton says all killers are egomaniacs who put their needs above everyone else. Hamilton says there are no perfect crimes and the killers carry the burden of not being discovered. And outside, Halsworth proposes to Evelyn. I think this is their second date. Evelyn says she can't answer at this time. Richard shows up saying it's cold and Evelyn needs a wrap. Halsworth goes inside to get the wrap. Evelyn tells Richard about the proposal and her refusal to answer. Richard makes his move, saying she feels for him like he feels for her. Evelyn emphatically says that is false, as she does not love Richard. Halsworth comes back and Richard leaves. Evelyn follows to find out what is wrong. Evelyn goes to Richard's room. He is sulking by the window. Evelyn asks for clarification and Richard says he loves her. Evelyn knows that Kathryn was right about his crush. She says the situation is impossible and can't stand the pressure. He tries to double talk her into accepting him.
You came back because you wanted to be with me.
No, Dick, I don't love you.
You love me, but you haven't got the courage to face it.
But it could never be, Dick. She'd always be there between us.
Evelyn breaks down from the verbal attack and starts crying. Richard pulls a handkerchief out of the drawer. It's monogrammed with Kathryn's initials. Evelyn says that is what she meant when she said Kathryn would always be with them. Back in the city, Richard goes to see Detective Lieutenant Egan. Richard starts throwing out theories about what happened to his wife, like he was the killer on an episode of Columbo 1971 to 2003. He questions the police about the homeless pickpocket. Richard says he may hire his own detectives and leaves with a huff. Richard goes to his office and meets with some of his staff. Richard's personal mail is on the desk. In the stack, he finds a letter written on Kathryn's stationery that appears to be in her handwriting. At the same time, the record store across the street starts playing Richard and Kathryn's favorite song. Richard slams the window shut and turns his attention to the letter. Inside the envelope is a pawn shop ticket, number 22787. Richard takes a cab to the pawn shop. He presents the ticket to a tall, slender man. The broker confirms that the ticket is for the locket that Kathryn carried. Richard examines the locket. It is inscribed and has the couple's pictures. Richard looks at the pawn book and what appears to be his wife's signature from 2 days earlier. The broker keeps the ticket, but won't let Richard take the object because he was not the one who pawned it. The broker describes Kathryn and her green custom outfit. Richard leaves the pawn shop. He is in such a haze he forgets about the taxi he left waiting. He returns later with a detective. The broker is much shorter and swears he doesn't have the locket. Richard no longer has the ticket, but they look up 22787 in the pawn book. There is someone else's name and a different object. The detectives dismiss Richard as being mistaken. Richard meets with a handwriting expert at the university who is a friend of Dr. Hamilton. The expert says it looks like Kathryn's writing, but it could be from a close family member. Dr. Hamilton mentions that Evelyn is still at the lake with Halsworth and is in good hands. Richard goes home and looks for Kathryn's stationery, but it is not in the drawer. Phillips, the butler, tells Richard that Evelyn took the stationery when she went to the lake. He also mentions that Evelyn wore the same perfume brand as Kathryn. Richard heads back to the lake. He finds Evelyn packing to leave. She is leaving because that Richard had professed his love to her earlier. She says she has written a note to him on Kathryn's stationery. Richard comments that the writing is so similar to Kathryn. They spat back and forth. Finally, Richard insists on driving Evelyn back to town. Before they can pull away, a porter tells Richard he has a phone call. The caller is Dr. Hamilton this time. He tells Richard that the expert confirmed that the writing was indeed Kathryn's. Richard sees Halsworth walking around like a hangdog. Evelyn has friend-zoned Halsworth. Richard tells the young man not to give up and to go to his car and try again with Evelyn. Richard is in the store buying some luggage, presumably so he can flee. Suddenly, he sees Kathryn in her outfit on the street. He follows her, but can't catch her because of his bad leg. The woman enters an apartment building, and Richard follows, seeing which room she went into. When Richard knocks on the door, the building owner comes up the stairs and asks if he is looking for someone. She says the room is empty and for rent. Richard asks to see the rent. He inspects every door, closet, and exit, but finds no one. Richard starts talking about his wife and the fact that she was murdered. He then goes on a jag about throwing bags of cats into the river. The building owner screams for help, and Richard leaves. Richard makes his way to Dr. Hamilton for a psychiatric session. Dr. Hamilton asks if they are speaking as friends or as a client/doctor. Richard tells the doctor to consider this visit any way he wants. Richard talks about seeing Kathryn on the street and not believing in the supernatural.
I don't believe in ghosts, and I don't believe in the supernatural. I don't believe that people live on in life after they've left it. But I saw Kathryn today, or somebody that was like Kathryn.
How do you know it wasn't Kathryn? Why do you go on torturing yourself with these doubts?
Dr. Hamilton goes over a few ideas such as sleepwalking or amnesia. Hamilton says he cannot help Richard because the patient has not placed the doctor in his trust. Richard asks, and Dr. Hamilton says that the only time he has seen a case like this was a man who murdered his wife. Richard leaves and makes a night drive back up the mountain road to the place where he murdered Kathryn. He climbs down the hill where the stack of logs cover his wife's car. Richard shines the light into the car, and there's nobody inside. From the other side of the car, Dr. Hamilton and several police officers are there to arrest him. The police reveal that they found Kathryn's body the day after the murder. Dr. Hamilton tells Richard that the rose was the clue that caught him because she didn't receive it until after she left home. The lady Richard saw on the street was a policewoman, the ring theft was a setup, and so was the pawn shop and the returned items. Evelyn was not part of the setup. Richard seems a little happy that his wife is truly dead and he is not crazy. The police now have the evidence to convict him. Richard says, "It's all over. The end, doctor." Conclusion. Richard's, Humphrey Bogart's, motive is to exchange his wife for her sister. This is a more advanced version of the roommate switch seen in Season 6, Episode 11, titled The Switch, on Seinfeld 1989 to 1998. Jerry was trying to do the impossible and switch the roommate he was dating. But is it possible without murder? Australian actor Jack Thompson, of Breaker Morant fame, there's a link below, somehow managed to live successfully with two sisters, Leona and Bunky King, for 15 years. Wow, there seem to be some odd moments in this film that would seem hard to accomplish. Kathryn left the house first on the way to the lodge. Richard was able to get ahead of her on the mountain road. This seems very unlikely, and that no other car would be blocked by his car in the road. Also, after Dr. Hamilton dropped the bomb on Richard, how did he and the police get to the murder site ahead of Richard? How long did they have to hide in the dark before springing the trap? How did Dr. Hamilton, Sidney Greenstreet, get down the hill? I did get some insight into the lackluster performances in this film. In The Making of Casablanca, Bogart, Bergman, and World War II, Algene Harmitz states that Bogart hated the screenplay and told Jack Warner, "I'm sorry, Jack, I just can't do it. My stomach will not let me, and I'm an honest man, and I have to be honest with myself in this manner. If you want to get tough with me, I will feel that I have lost a friend." Warner would not produce Passage to Marseille 1944 until Bogart completed the role in this film. In 1947, they released a better version of this film with Bogart, Alexis Smith, and Barbara Stanwyck titled The Two Mrs. Carrolls, 1947. World famous short summary? The Switch, it can't be done. If you enjoyed the show, please leave a comment or a review where you watch or listen. It really helps the show get found. As a technical note, References and citations are listed for each show on the site at classicmovierev.com. Beware the Moors. All right, in a second, there'll be a couple of boxes pop up. One will be a film noir movie that I recommend, and another will be a playlist of all film noirs.